Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today we are diving into something that is like everywhere, but we hardly ever really notice it.
I wonder what that could be.
It's interval schedules.
Those tricky things.
Yeah, and these are like systems, I guess you could call them, that kind of explain how we end up reinforcing certain behaviors based on like time passing.
Time, huh?
Yeah, it's like think about it, deadlines when you get your paycheck.
Ooh.
Or even, those pop quizzes that everybody loves.
Right. They all use time to get you going.
They all tap into that power of time, really.
It is really interesting when you think about it. Like, we usually think about reinforcement being connected to what you do, right?
Yeah.
But with these interval schedules, it really shows you just how much time plays a part in getting people motivated.
Yeah, we are really excited to dive into this. We've got some really good excerpts from, this book called Behavior Analysis for Lasting Change.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
That's going to help us kind of break this whole thing down. We're going to be looking at some real-world examples, everything from like a teacher trying to get their students to participate to how bills like actually get passed in Congress.
I mean, you're right. They are seriously everywhere, these schedules, like woven right into our lives.
Totally.
You start to notice them and you see them everywhere, like I said. And they really do impact how people behave, even if you don't really see it happening.
So let's get down to it. What exactly are interval schedules?
Well, at their core, interval schedules reinforce a behavior, but it's based on how much time has gone by instead of how many times someone does something. It's kind of like saying, hey, if you keep doing this thing for, I don't know, a certain amount of time, you'll get a reward.
Oh, okay. I see. So it's not about how much someone does something. It's about like the time they spend doing it.
Exactly.
That's a pretty unique way to think about, how reinforcement works.
It really is. And there's two main types we're going to unpack today. The first is fixed interval, or we call it FI for short.
Okay.
And then there's variable interval, 6.
Got it.
So let's start with FI.
Yeah.
Picture this. You're a teacher named Chuck.
All right, I'm Chuck.
And you're trying to get your students to have more discussions in class. You've noticed that if you praise them every 5 minutes for participating, that they actually stay engaged.
So Chuck's using that fixed interval, that 5 minutes, to reinforce participation.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it doesn't even matter like how many times each student actually speaks up, right?
Right.
It's just that consistent rhythm that keeps the discussion going. Does that sound
Exactly. That consistency, that's the big thing with FI schedules.
Okay.
Because everyone knows when that reinforcement is coming, and it leads to some really interesting behavior patterns.
Oh.
In fact, the textbook actually calls it a scallop pattern. Think about like your own workouts. Do you ever notice you push yourself harder right before you get to take a break?
Oh, absolutely. Like that burst of energy right before the timer goes off?
Yeah.
Totally familiar with that.
Okay, so with these FI schedules, you often see people kind of slack off right after they get the reward.
Right.
And then they start to do more and more as they get closer to the next reward time.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's almost like people are thinking ahead, they're anticipating that reinforcement, and they're adjusting how much effort they're putting in based on that.
Exactly. And this predictable pattern, you see it everywhere. Students cramming for exams, employees getting ready for their yearly review.
Oh, for sure.
It's all over.
So that's FI. Now, what about variable interval?
6.
How's that different?
6 schedules, those throw in a bit of surprise. The reinforcement still depends on time passing, but the intervals between the rewards, they can change.
Okay.
So let's say you have a manager who's trying to get their employees to have good posture all day. Instead of checking in on them at specific times, they could use, I don't know, maybe a chime that goes off randomly throughout the day.
Okay.
And that's the signal for the employees to check their posture. If they're sitting correctly, they get a little bonus added to their paycheck that week.
So it's like those surprise check-ins keep everybody on their toes because they never know when the next one's coming.
Yeah.
That's a really smart way to get people to keep putting in the effort, I think. Would you say that's a more effective strategy than, say, only praising good posture at the end of the day?
Oh, that's a great question. Because it is unpredictable, VI schedules tend to result in behavior that's more steady and consistent compared to those FI schedules. Think about like when you're training a dog with treats. You give those rewards randomly, keeps them on their toes, always hoping for that next tasty surprise.
Right. They never know when it's coming. So we've got these two kind of powerful tools, FI and BI.
Yeah.
But are there any downsides? I mean, like, what are some challenges that people who use ABA might run into with these interval schedules?
Ooh, that is a super important thing to think about. While interval schedules are pretty easy to use, they might not always get you the highest number of the behavior you're looking for.
Okay.
Especially if you compare them to ratio schedules. Those are the ones that reward based on like how many times someone does something.
Uh-huh.
Interval schedules, those can result in a slightly lower response rate overall.
Oh, so if we're like really trying to get someone to do a specific action a lot, an interval schedule might not be the best choice.
Well, it kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you really want people to respond consistently and steadily, a V schedule can be really good.
Right.
But if what you're after is like a fast and high amount of behavior, there might be other ways that are better. Think of it like this. If you want someone to practice piano regularly, a V schedule with those random rewards, that could work great. But if you need them to, I don't know, to play a really hard piece perfectly for a performance, you're going to need a different approach. You'll need something that focuses on repeating it over and over again and getting it right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like picking the right tool for what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
So how can we make the most of these interval schedules? What factors can make them more or less effective?
The textbook mentions a few things. The quality of the reinforcer is really key. A reward that people really want and are motivated by that's going to work better than something they don't really care about. Like, think about giving a kid a sticker versus giving them extra playtime.
Yeah.
The reward that's more exciting is probably going to get you better results.
Oh, definitely. Like the reward needs to be something that's actually worth working for. And I imagine the amount of reinforcement probably matters too, right?
Right.
Like getting one sticker versus a whole sheet of stickers.
Exactly. The magnitude or like how big the reinforcer is can definitely make a difference. And then there's the time between the behavior and when they get the reward. The longer you make them wait, the less effective the reinforcement is likely to be. Like, imagine waiting a whole week to get paid versus getting paid right after you finish a task.
Right.
Getting the reward right away can make a big difference in how motivated someone is.
Yeah, it's like all these things to get like a reinforcement package deal.
Right.
We need to think about the quality, the quantity, and the timing to get the most out of our interval schedule.
Right.
Speaking of timing, the book mentions how interval schedules can affect how impulsive someone is. It talks about this study where they had kids choose between a small reward they could have right away and a bigger reward they had to wait for. Kind of like that marshmallow experiment.
Exactly. That experiment really shows how different ways of setting things up can influence whether a child is willing to wait for a bigger reward. It suggests that if you carefully design the interval schedule and the reinforcement that comes with it, you can actually play a role in shaping someone's ability to delay gratification.
That's incredible. It really highlights how these schedules, even if we don't realize it, can have a powerful effect on behavior.
Yeah.
So let's move from these kind of basic ideas to some practical ways we can use this stuff. How can we apply these interval schedules in different places? The textbook talks about classrooms, workplaces, even homes. Let's start with classrooms.
Yeah.
How can teachers, like our friend Chuck, how can they use interval schedules to make learning better?
Well, imagine you have a teacher who's trying to encourage their students to really get into reading their assigned texts. Instead of just waiting until the end of the chapter for a quiz, they could set a timer maybe for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
At the end of each interval, they check to see if the students are actually reading. And the ones who are, they get a little reward, like a point that goes towards something special the class gets to do.
So it's like those little deadlines are keeping the students on track and focused on what they're supposed to be doing. Even though the reward isn't tied to finishing a specific page or anything like that, the interval, it's like it sets a clear expectation for them to be engaged.
Right.
That's pretty clever. But wouldn't the students eventually figure that out and just pretend to read right before the timer goes off?
That's a really good point. And that's where the beauty of a V schedule comes in. Because if the teacher uses a variable interval, the students won't know exactly when that check-in is happening.
Oh, okay.
So they're going to be more likely to stay engaged the whole time they're supposed to be reading, just in case.
That makes a lot of sense. So now that we've seen how this works in a classroom, let's imagine applying this to a busy office. How could you use interval schedules to, I don't know, to improve how people work together and how productive they are?
Think about a company where people aren't consistently taking their breaks.
Yeah.
They could set up a VE schedule with a chime, something that randomly goes off during the day, and every time it goes off, anyone who's on their break gets entered into, I don't know, a raffle for a gift card.
Okay.
That way, people are encouraged to take their breaks, but they don't feel like they have to be working all the time.
That's a fun way to encourage healthy habits at work. And it's a win-win. Employees get a break and maybe win something, and the company has people who are more rested and productive.
Exactly. It's all about finding creative ways to use these principles in everyday situations. And it doesn't stop at classrooms and workplaces. We can't forget about using interval schedules at home.
Oh, yeah. Let's get into that. I think a lot of parents and caregivers could really benefit from understanding this stuff. The book mentioned using these schedules for chores. That's like a universal problem, right?
Oh, yeah.
Getting kids to pick up their toys or help out around the house can feel impossible sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine a parent who wants their kid to help with tidying up. They could set a timer, let's say, for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And if the child has put away at least 5 toys, by the time the timer goes off, they get a sticker on their chore chart.
So you're not rewarding them for picking up every single toy, but you're giving them a time frame to work within. The interval creates a structure for the behavior you want.
Right.
But couldn't this lead to, like, kids just rushing to pick up any 5 toys,
right,
even if they don't belong in those spots?
Oh, that's a great observation. And it highlights something really important. The way you set up the details of the schedule, that matters a lot. In this case, the parent could tell the child that the toys have to be put away in the right place for them to count towards the sticker. And as the child gets better with the system, the parent could slowly increase the time interval or the number of toys they need to pick up to earn the reward.
This is really eye-opening. I feel like we're really starting to see how much potential interval schedules have to shape behaviors in all kinds of places. But before we go too far, we should probably talk about the ethical side of using these strategies. After all, we are talking about influencing behavior.
Yeah.
And it's super important to do that responsibly and ethically.
You were absolutely right. Whenever we're using ABA principles, we have to be thinking about the ethics. With interval schedules, it's crucial to make sure that the reinforcement is actually something the person finds motivating and that we're not using the schedule in a way that feels forceful or manipulative or like we're punishing them.
So it's not just about getting the behavior we want. It's about making sure the person's well-being and their choices are respected the whole time.
Exactly. We have to use these tools in a respectful and sensitive way.
Right.
Ethical implementation is so important to make sure that interval schedules and all ABA strategies really are used to create positive change that actually benefits the individual.
Wow, this deep dive into interval schedules has really been eye-opening for me. It's amazing how much time actually influences how we act, even when we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm starting to see these schedules everywhere now.
It's kind of like suddenly noticing this hidden pattern in everything around you, Once you get the concept, you start to see how these interval schedules are just built into how we live our lives, shaping how we act and how we interact with each other.
Yeah. It's like those optical illusions where you see one thing and then suddenly, boom, your brain flips it and you see something totally different. So what's the main thing you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive?
I think the key message here is that time is a really important part of changing behavior. Interval schedules, they really show us that reinforcement isn't just about the immediate consequences of what we do, but also about like the anticipation and the rhythm that time creates.
And for us, as ABA professionals, understanding these different types of interval schedules, the fixed ones, the variable ones, how the quality and the timing of reinforcement play a part that gives us these powerful tools to help people reach their goals in a way that's meaningful and ethical.
Exactly. Whether we're trying to get someone to do something more or maybe do something less, interval schedules give us these flexible strategies that we can adjust to fit each person's needs and situation.
So for our listener out there, now that they've got all this knowledge about interval schedules, what's like one practical thing they can do to use this in their own work or even in their personal life?
I'd say start by just observing situations where these schedules might be happening. Pay attention to how your own behavior or how people around you act are influenced by reinforcement that's based on time. You might be surprised by the patterns you start to notice.
That's a great challenge. Start paying attention to those time intervals. See if you can spot that scallop pattern we talked about in your own study habits, in your routines at work, even in how you interact with family and friends. And remember, the amazing thing about understanding these concepts is that it gives you the power to be more aware and make deliberate choices about your own behavior and the behaviors of the people you work with. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep using the power of ABA to make a positive difference in the world around you.